A fully restored beach fight, shotguns much earlier than ever before, and a special unused enemy type. This is Halo Combat Evolved Restored, a video series and mod dedicated to analyzing and restoring all the cut content in Halo Combat Evolved. Everything that was left behind in the game's code or hinted at in various media, including beta builds and even commercials. And with the new expanded scope of this work and the release of the 1749 beta build, I wanted to revisit that iconic beach, the silent Cartographer, to give some much needed polish to what we covered last time and also add in some never before seen cut encounters. So let's just jump right in because we've a lot to cover. First up is one of the most memorable sections of the game, that initial beach fight. Essentially unleashing the full chaos of the sandbox upon the player as they attempt to wrestle control from the Covenant. If we look at an internal pre-release build that was only showcased at private Bungie events, there's a very short window in one of the videos where you can just barely make out a Wraith parked on the silent Cartographer beach. Noting this, I took a look through both the base game and the 1749 beta, but unfortunately never found any Wraith references despite my best efforts. So this naturally raises a rather important question. Was this just a simple piece of placeholder scenery like the ones you see on Truth and Reconciliation? Or was this going to be an actual component of the beach clear, like an assault on the control room? Or was it just simply a relic of this level's history as a developer test bench, with no intentions of ever being included? Well, perhaps the easiest way to answer this question is to add an actual Wraith and find out if it all works. Figure out if the beach was designed around it. So that's exactly what I did, and what I found was that this hilly portion at the center of the beach provides excellent cover against Wraith mortar shells. A little too good, in fact, almost like it was designed to suit this purpose. So my only conclusion was that a Wraith had to originally play some key component of this beach clear. It's all just a little too perfect. And so with that important Wraith question answered, we now have a bit of a dilemma. Your starting equipment here is not even close to good enough to deal with a whole tank. You get an assault rifle and a pistol. Good enough to handle that flimsy Banshee I covered in my last video, sure, but a Wraith? Yeah, no. We need some real firepower here. However, you can't just start with something like a rocket launcher. Well, you can, but you shouldn't. Reason being, remember those cut ghosts I mentioned in my last video? These would be spirits that would drop off enemy ghosts depending on which way you went from the initial beach fight. These ghosts serve a rather specific purpose. If you were to say, abandon your allies to certain doom at the beach fight, the game would spawn these ghosts in as an artificial difficulty barrier. If you have the warthog that you get from actually clearing the beach, these ghosts are no problem, but if you abandon that beach, well, it doesn't go quite as smoothly. That is the essence of a difficulty barrier. Give the player the freedom to do what they want, but if what they want is to be a well, you know, consequences. So we can't just give the player something like a rocket launcher at the very start, because that completely defeats the entire purpose of this difficulty barrier. So we have to get a little more creative here. First, let's look for some inspiration. You'll notice all around the outside and inside portions, there's fallen marines. These are very common throughout the game and really just exist to refill ammo and health, but they also hint towards battles that the player doesn't see. If we extend this concept to the beach fight and place fallen marines all around, perhaps some advanced party that was ambushed before the player arrives, this would be the key to giving players what they need without giving them too much right away. Hence leading us to this fallen marine leaning against a Covenant communication tower, and next to him a fully loaded rocket launcher ready to go that the player can then use to take out the Wraith. Now, of course, this does all break down if you say run up, take these rockets, then f*** off and use it to kill the ghost, leaving your allies to almost certain doom. But I'd also like to remind you that I am essentially God in this world and can do very horrible things to you if you do this. Just something to consider. The placement of this marine and rocket is a bit specific. It forces you to first take cover and carefully eliminate the Covenant mobs in front of you. Then you'd have to leave cover to grab the rockets, temporarily exposing yourself to the Wraith, and finally you use those rockets to take out the Wraith. This whole sequence works incredibly well in practice. The rockets acting as a sub-objective forces the player to strategize a bit more, especially with that Banshee thrown in the mix. This Banshee was something I covered in my last video. It's something Bungie left behind in the code, scripted to fly around and engage the player on the beach that ultimately went unused. All these different cut elements, the Banshee, the Wraith, they all combined into something truly special, and to my surprise, it all just kinda worked. Well, at least most of it did. Yeah, as I was tinkering with this idea, it became very clear that the Marine AI needed a little bit of updating. They are scripted to push up with the player as they clear out the beach. The problem, of course, being the original level scripting naturally does not account for a wraith thrown into the mix. So, an earlier revision would see your allies stupidly push up into the loving arms of a Covenant tank. Fixing this issue required rewriting a lot of the Marine AI to specifically stay behind the hill until the player takes out the wraith, after which they rally and push up with you to the final wave of Covenant at the other end. And so it all worked out pretty darn good. I believe if Bungie hadn't cut the vehicle encounters entirely from this level, this wraith encounter might have just made it in some form. It perfectly encapsulates all the best parts of the Halo sandbox. And as a final note before we move on, with the Banshee and Wraith now playing a broader role in this beach clear, it also made sense in my testing to add some ammo and health at the end of it all, utilizing those patented bungo ammo drops. Helps the rest of the mission flow a lot smoother. Next up on my list is the crashed Pelican. When I dug through this level initially, I found unused references to shotguns present in the map's data files. Given this level's history as a testing sandbox, I originally wrote this off as just a remnant of this level's past. However, I very recently restored the Halo 1749 beta build to the Master Chief Collection. This was a playtester's build 2 months before the final release and has a lot of very unique and odd things packed into it. One important difference that's relevant here is the shotgun originally played a much more broad role in the early game, being present on both Halo and Truth and Reconciliation. It would instead be the flamethrower that would have been introduced in the second half, taking the role of the shotgun in that respect. So in that context, maybe these unused shotgun references weren't just a relic from earlier. Following the lead of 1749, maybe these shotguns were originally going to play a much broader role in this level. Similar to the beach fight, the most logical way to find out if this is true is to add some shotguns to the level and see if it's designed around it, see if it all works. I believe the most natural place these would have been introduced is during the crashed Pelican segment. This is right before you head into the main facility where it's mostly close quarters combat, and also where it's just a general weapons and ammo dump anyway. One fear I did have is that adding the shotgun here would completely ruin the difficulty balance when going into the main facility, essentially turning it into easy baby mode given the shotgun's reputation as a rock star weapon. This didn't happen though. It didn't really make the main facility easier or harder, you just approach it all differently. You prioritize getting close rather than picking off from afar with precision weapons. It all just kind of flows rather nicely, almost like the rooms were designed around the player potentially having a shotgun. So that seems to answer that question rather convincingly, and also explains the number of jackals you'd see, since they are a natural counter to the shotgun. Alright, next up, let's talk about the Engineers, a famously cut enemy type that wouldn't wind up re-emerging until Halo 3 ODST. You know, that excellent DLC that was sold as a $60 game. I'm not mad, it's just the truth. Anyway, data references to these engineers are actually still present in Silent Cartographer, likely a remnant from before they were ultimately cut. The engineer model and AI still exist in the base game as well, just very unfinished. However, modders set about fixing this to make them work correctly within the game's engine, essentially finishing what Bungie started. To go about actually restoring these engineers, we can look to ODST as a reference for what their role in the Covenant was going to be. They are portrayed as more passive, friendly creatures, acting as, well, engineers, the tech experts, the one that actually know and analyze the Forerunner technology, though admitting this out loud is actually considered heresy by the Covenant. Makes sense then why the engineers would play a role in Silent Cartographer specifically. They were likely the ones that analyzed the map to lead the Covenant to the control room. Cortana also hints at this when they initially lock you out.
Interesting. I underestimated the Covenant's understanding of Halo subsystems.
So, to this end, you'll first find an engineer in the security room, acting as the one who locks the player out of the main facility. Then you'll find 2 more engineers in the map room itself, acting as the ones that led the analysis of it, leading the Covenant to Halo's control center. Then, in accordance with their ODST interpretation, these engineers are fully passive, simply fleeing from the player whenever they approach. They are also fully optional to kill. So, just like in ODST, you can view them as true victims of circumstance, only doing what is absolutely necessary to ensure the survival of their species after likely being forcefully merged into the Covenant, and recognize that you too would probably do the same exact thing in their situation, and so you are fully within your right to simply leave them be. Or you can ignore all that and be a complete asshole. Some work was needed to get their pathfinding dialed in. Fortunately, their flight AI works very similar to the Sentinels, so this wasn't too difficult. Overall, Halo's AI still feels so ahead of its time. Stuff like this just works and really speaks volumes of the sophisticated systems Bungie created. Now I'd like to close out this revisit with some restored enemy encounters I missed in my last video. First, we have these jackals that spawn in after deactivating the security system. They are from the base game and will be dropped off by a spirit dropship, and you'd encounter them as you make your way back to the beach. Interestingly though, these were not always going to be jackals. So, turns out, these jackals are a part of two squads, called Advanced Stealth Elite and Rear Stealth Elite. Probably pretty obvious what these jackals were originally going to be. This actually makes sense too. Right after deactivating the security system, you're ambushed by stealth elites as you make your way back up, so we can interpret these extra couple squads as the ones that stayed behind to secure the landing zone. I suspect Bungie changed these to be jackals instead, just to switch it up a bit. Stealth elites can also be very difficult to deal with, so an encounter of jackals makes it a bit less brutal, especially on Legendary. At least that's how I'm interpreting all this. And the next cut encounter is in the main facility about halfway down. This encounter is completely empty in the base game, containing nothing but leftover firing positions. There's no indication of what squads this one might have contained. At first I figured, let's add some more stealth elites like in the security room, but then it became very apparent why this whole encounter was cut in the first place. Dialogue.
Full hammer to ground teams. You've got 2 enemy dropships coming in fast.
Having an encounter right here conflicts with a dialogue trigger, so the player would be stuck fighting some enemies while dialogue plays, essentially missing all or most of what was said because multitasking is hard, okay? So it's perfectly reasonable that Bungie would remove this encounter. But I'm not in the business of leaving things removed, so the only thing that truly makes sense here is sleeping grunts. They fit perfectly because this room is right after the player battles through 2 guarded floors, so it's natural that security might lighten a bit here. More importantly, however, they don't conflict with the dialogue. The player gets all the juicy lore, which honestly really just boils down to, oh no, the Covenant found us on this giant circle! Anyway, that's all I have to cover for this rather short revisit of Silent Cartographer. The only other thing of note is a 1749 beta exclusive ammo model. Instead of the bright orange spanker ammo boxes, 1749 used rocket canisters as the ammo pickup model for the rocket launcher. It's honestly pretty neat, and of course, likely very obvious why they changed this. It's very easy to mistake the actual rocket launcher with the rocket ammo. And that's all I have for you on this one. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Unless, of course, you're one of those chaotic evil types running around killing all the engineers. I would once again like to remind you that I am essentially God here.